Forester? Dude, what happened? You get out on your own, break away from your Impreza parents and style and image, and have you been eating at Shady Maple every night? Forester, I'm only saying this because I love you, but you're getting fat.
Subaru Foresters, far from sublime, but Subaru Foresters, nice for a time.
2019 Subaru Forester. Ah, yes. Subaru Forester, the Nike Air monarch of cars. You can hit the trails, tailgate an arena football game, go cruising for women with silver fingernails and lots of wooden jewelry. Yeah, you'll find them by the little booth at the grocery store, scratching off lottery tickets. You can do that, all in one car. But that was the old Forester. Those first two generations they seem to straddle the hopscotch line between a youthful car for adult aspirations and an antiquated car for people who expect bad news from a phone call that comes after 8 p.m. But this is a 5th gen. This is new. This is nice. This is accessible. This is infuriating. It's almost too inoffensive to dislike. Who could possibly muster up the energy to hate a Subaru Forester without the aid of performance-enhancing drugs? It's nothing less than the very essence of modern crowd-pleasing. Doesn't mean it's going to get everyone's flag to full mast, but it's not like that flag is wet and soggy on the ground either. It's so goddamn pleasant. But am I well-equipped to explain how grossly vanilla this car is? I wish Tim Dillon were here. He'd know what to say. This is a 5th generation Subaru Forester, and it's no longer the little rompy station wagon it was in the 1st and 2nd generations. As much as Subaru insists the Forester is a genre-defying crossover, it's an SUV. Look at it. The Forester is an SUV now. Forester is aware of its weight problem. It's been aware of it since the 4th generation when it really ballooned up. So here in the 5th generation, it's trying the black is slimming technique. And then with the Sport trim model. Sport on a Forester doesn't get you the turbo, or larger displacement, or a different tune, or gearing. Sport is just an appearance package. It gets you this charcoaly paint, black wheels, and red accents to distract you from its butterscotch crimpets addiction. Let's look at dimensions. Here is my pre-facelift 2nd gen and today's 5th gen. The 5th gen is longer, but not by much. The 2nd generation has more ground clearance and more room for wheel travel. The 5th generation has larger wheels, but the 2nd generation has taller tires. The 2nd generation has a stubbier nose for less overhang, but the 5th generation has a slant cut on its nose, on the bottom of its nose there, which may help not scraping the body when you're descending off of a hill. The 5th generation is tall, but when you look at it in this photo, it's not extremely tall. I guess it just feels taller on the inside. Yeah, taller, quieter, pleasant, vanilla, safe. Safe every day. So safe. Platana. Oh, there's nothing wrong with this. 5th generation Subaru Forester. It's a plain hamburger on a charcoal grill at a church picnic. Anybody want any cheese? Raise your hands if you want some cheese. Can I have onions on it too? Ooh, Wild Child over here. Forester Sport. It says Sport on the tachometer. But the red line isn't any higher. The 2nd gens were rompy, goat-like wagons. And if you got a manual, power was split 50-50 all the time. There was no traction control. Traction control was your brain and your feet. Want to do drifts? Let off the clutch really fast in the snow and off you go. Want to pull away slowly and in control? Well, then just let the clutch out slowly. They were as simple as trucks. And that brings us to a bit of Subaru lore. Why are Subarus good in the snow? It's even come up between Joey Diaz and Joe Rogan. They were talking about it on one of the podcasts. They were talking about Subarus one time and trying to figure out how that common knowledge, like why does everybody say they're good in the snow? And then the conversation drifted off to something else. But this is the reason. It's a teaspoon of science and a gallon of bro science. Let's ignore Subaru's marketing stronghold in the Northeast, where there's a lot of snow, and their sponsoring of the US ski team in 1984, and Subaru's repeated rally wins. Let's just focus on how Subarus are put together. Subaru loves their boxer engine layout, just like a Porsche, just in the front of the car instead of the back. And they continue to hold on and develop flat 4 and flat 6 engines. So when you take an engine and lay the cylinders horizontally and opposing each other instead of in a line vertically, you are moving the weight of the engine lower in the engine bay without having to physically lower the engine entirely. It's like how the tortilla is taller when you wrap it up, and it's flat when you lay it down. It's the same amount of weight, just spread out and lower. So that means you can have an engine that remains high enough so the critical oil pan is safe from harm. Because if you wanted to take a regular inline engine and, drop it down to lower the weight, well, now you're dropping the oil pan close to the ground. But with a flat 4, it remains upright. But the engine, but the weight's still low because you move the cylinder heads and everything down off to the side. So you still have good weight distribution for solid footing and handling. And that sounds good, right? Sounds like it makes sense when I'm saying it. And if a salesperson practices enough, it sure sounds good when they say it. It's bro science. Yes, you are lowering the weight, but not by much. And yes, you are protecting the engine, but not from stupidity. Well, what about the symmetrical all-wheel drive system? Well, it's a fancy name, and it's about as meaningful as what is written on the inside of these headlight housings. Subaru bifunctional LED headlight. High and low beams. It means it has high and low beams. Symmetrical all-wheel drive. It means it has a longitudinal engine with a drive shaft going straight down the middle of the chassis, like most longitudinally mounted engines. The bro science says that a longitudinal engine, and by extension transmission, is better for all-wheel drive power delivery than a transversely mounted engine and transmission because on a transverse all-wheel drive engine layout, like a Toyota RAV4, a Forester's competitor, the torque has to come out the side of the engine, sideways, and make a 90-degree into the transmission, and most likely make another 90-degree turn to go out the drive shaft, which may or may not be directly pointed at the rear differential, which may or may not be centered between the rear wheels. The real science does say that every time work travels between mediums, gear sets, U-joints, worm gears, there is some parasitic loss, which costs power and miles per gallon. That's real. The bro science says that Subaru's direct shot, boom, right to the rear end, is more efficient, which is true. But is it a huge advantage? Not really. I mean, it helps. In the same way that pre-workout or pomp and circumstance, aka Randy Savage's theme song, helps you lift more weight. A RAV4 or Subaru's own Ricky Steamboat, the Mitsubishi Evo, are just as capable in the snow as a Subaru. But Subaru put all-wheel drive on all of their USDM. I know there were some two-wheel drive rarities in our market, but 99% of the time, when someone got a Subaru, even if it was a simple sedan, it had all-wheel drive. And customers would then see their neighbors' 1991 front-wheel drive Camry getting stuck in the snow while their own legacies kept on going. So there you go. That's why they say Subarus are good in the snow, because bro science, some real science, and marketing. But now that all manufacturers offer all-wheel drive variants on cars in 2020, is Subaru still relevant? Let's take a look. This engine designation is the FB25D. It's the only engine option offered on any range of the Foresters. It's a 2.5-liter direct injected flat 4 making 182 horsepower at 5,800 RPM and 176 pound-feet of torque at 4,400 RPM. It has a compression ratio of 12:1, and it's the successor of the old EJ series. So yep, as we said with the Impreza we reviewed a while back, head gaskets are good, you got timing change, you got direct injection, the FB series is a winner. But no more manuals. Not on the Foresters, at least on the 5th gen. You only get a Lineartronic CVT transmission. Subaru is now the automotive equivalent of a Lego. You'll like the build we tell you to like. Well, they're doing it because for the miles per gallon, Subaru has to stay marketable. The fuel economy you get on this SUV is a healthy 26 miles per gallon city and 33 highway, and that's better than a second generation. I will concede that this CVT, driving it around, it doesn't fake shift unless you put it into sport mode. If you drive casually, it'll just rise to its most efficient peak and then just stay there as you accelerate. So thank you for making a continuously variable transmission act like it's supposed to. The Subaru Forester is one of those cars that seems like it should be good at everything, but it doesn't particularly imprint itself into your mind as this hyper-masculine experience. It doesn't really have to, because its function is to be that car that stands by you in the way your favorite band never did as you got older. The Subaru Forester is the equivalent of homespun wisdom that sounds profound, but doesn't actually mean anything. Hey, I'm your grandfather, and you know what they say. The fruit doesn't fall far from the tree, but it's miles away when it spoils. Huh? Subaru Forester Sport. When kids playing in the street shout, "Car!" This is the car. Naturally, different trim levels offer differing levels of sophistication. Gone are the days of solid 50-50 torque split. Now it's all variable, while the premium trim gives you X mode, which optimizes engine output and a transmission ratio for the all-wheel drive system, while also enhancing the variable torque distribution system to help control wheel spin and hill descent. And when you get the sport mode, you get dual function X mode, which adds a personalized setting for snow and dirt conditions, as well as deep snow, mud conditions. In terms of sales, model year 2019 places this Forester released in 2018, which saw 171,613 models sold in North America. But if you go by the actual year 2019, it then becomes the highest selling year in the history of the Forester, with North American sales topping 180,179 units. So even though I keep coming back to this word vanilla, it's not even vanilla bean. It's just like Redner's Warehouse Market's plain vanilla flavor. It has as many demographics in mind. It's like a YouTube film essayist examining the unplucked apples of hidden meaning in The Last Jedi. The Forester is accessible because it's the automotive Venn diagram where trail wanderers and cool ants from Florida intersect. But owning a Forester doesn't demand having some adventurous life any more than owning a 4Runner does. Perhaps the best adventure is the one you never take, because an idea can never disappoint you. In a way, a Forester struggles to disappoint because the idea of a Forester doesn't aspire to be anything more than adequate. But anybody who's ever had the wake-up call of measuring their own dick only to compare it against the national average in the name of hope, well, aspiring to adequacy is just fine. So should you buy one? My opinions are biased, because Team Subaru wooed me away from Team Toyota. Although all those 4Runners are calling me back, but truck miles per gallon. Whereas the 5th generation Forester fits my tripod, has metal cargo tie-down loops bolted to the chassis so I can torque my ratchet straps down tight, and it gets better mileage than my 2nd gen Forester. And it'll be easier to park than a 4Runner. And it won't have truck seat bolstering crushed syndrome. The seats won't be wrecked from people just sliding out of the seats and ruining the bolstering. On the other hand, it doesn't have a roll-down rear window like a 4Runner does. So it's close. But now that they solved the mile per gallon problem with direct injection, a start-stop feature, well, and that CVT, the current generation Forester just nudged out the 4Runner as RCR's replacement camera car. Oh, and one last thing. And this may be bro science too. Subarus, and by extension this Forester, they're all built around the all-wheel drive system. Your average front-wheel drive car that then has an all-wheel drive option as part of its lineup, well, that car was built to be a front-wheel drive car, and then they added on an all-wheel drive system and had to stick on a drive shaft going to the rear wheel somehow, or a center diff, which means you'll have two versions of the same car, but they may have different transmissions and the part numbers may be completely different, making sourcing parts a little bit more difficult, whereas Subaru ate the cost right from jump, so all the parts are streamlined across all models. It's the same bro science when you think of a A10 Warthog, like, it's a plane built around the 30mm rotary cannon. Well, that's how Subarus are built. They get the all-wheel drive system placed first and then just build the car around that. I mean, it sounds good. That's just bro science again. But it looks good in diagrams. Although, and this is coming from hanging out with mechanics all the time, I've heard it from Bruce, I've heard it from Justin Kramer, and I've heard it from other people I meet on the road. Every single mechanic has their own personal best story of how fast you can get a Subaru engine out. I remember Bruce told me he could have an engine out in an hour, and I told Justin Kramer that, and he said, oh, I can do that in 45 minutes. And then I came back to Bruce, and I told him that Kramer said he can get it out in 45 minutes, and Bruce said, yeah, if I had help, and no one bugs me, if we had all our tools laid out, I'll bet you I could have a Subaru engine out in a half an hour. So you see, right now someone has to yell, bet. It's like, all right, let's see you do this. But that whole joke comes down to, since they built the engine and transmission and the all-wheel drive, combination there and the drive shaft, everything's all in a line, and it's all super accessible from underneath. And maybe me just rambling about that is part of the Subaru lore that keeps hanging around. They're the last of the independents. They're building cars their own way. They may be quirky, they may have weird engines, but they're very easy first steps into the wider world of car culture.
Nice for a Subaru Forester in the current year. Nice, and not much more that I could say. Got lineartronic CVT, cleaner than a Walmart gift of a Wu-Tang CD. FB25D.